the itchy camel skins. So we're going to talk about that, and it's recording now, so don't say anything that you don't want maybe heard later. So, especially you, John. Just kidding. All right, so we're going to be in John chapter 3, so we're just going to kind of fly through these verses. There's two sets of verses that I want us to look at. The John chapter 3, verse 22 part is the part that I always think of. And, of course, we're not going to deal with the very first time. Well, there's a couple times that John is mentioned. Of course, way back at the birth of Jesus, John is mentioned because they're born really close at the same time. And then, of course, John is mentioned when he's in the desert baptizing people, and Jesus comes to be baptized. And John says, "No way, I'm not baptizing you." And Jesus says, "Yes, you are." And John was obedient. And so that was the thing. But the thing that I want us to look at is later on where John is mentioned in John chapter 3, verse 22. It says, "After these things, Jesus and his disciples came into the land of Judea, and there he remained with them and baptized. Now John was also baptizing in the Aenon, near Salem. And Aenon, I looked on my map. It's kind of fun when you read about these cities. I looked at my map, and Aenon was quite a ways away from Judea, where Jesus was, and it was closer up towards the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus was down in the Judea area, which is a little bit further down on the map. So they were probably, quite a ways away. But the reason these details were given is it was showing us that even though John the Baptist was doing ministry up here and Jesus was doing ministry here, there was a cross-pollination of the ministry because people were going all over the place, walking around and talking. And, of course, what was everybody talking about when Jesus was doing his deal? Everybody was talking about the miracles that Jesus was doing But John was also still doing ministry and pointing people to Jesus as well at the same time. And so what you see here is there's a little bit of a rub that happens between a follower of Jesus and some of John the Baptist followers. So here's what happens. It says, "Now John also was baptizing in that area." Verse 24. It says, "For John had not yet been thrown into prison." So we know that the prison thing is coming for John the Baptist. Verse 25, it says, "Then there arose a dispute between some of John's disciples and the Jews about purification." So obviously there was some Jews that were followers of Jesus. They understood the Jewish law, but they also wanted to follow Jesus. And there was a dispute between those Jews and the disciples of John. Then verse 26, it says, "They came to John and said to him, 'Rabbi, he who was with you—'" James, can you just be a little quieter, please, buddy? Thank you. And it says, "There was a dispute between some of the disciples about purification." "And they came to John and said to him, 'Rabbi, he who was with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him.'" So John's disciples come to him. They've been following him. They've been doing this deal. Lots of people have been coming to faith in Jesus, being baptized. And they're like, "John, all of these people are following Jesus. Now, if it were you or me, and that happened, there would be a part of us that would possibly be like, well, that's kind of a bummer. How come Jesus gets all the people following him? We've been faithful. We've been doing what we're supposed to. How come no one's hanging out with us anymore?" But John doesn't do that. And this is exactly why John is spoken of by Jesus as the greatest follower of him. John says to him, "A man can receive nothing unless it has been given to him from heaven." A man can receive nothing unless it has been given to him from heaven. "You yourselves bear witness that I said, 'I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him.' He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. Therefore this joy of mine is fulfilled. He must increase, but I must decrease." That verse right there, verse 30, "He must increase, but I must decrease," is the whole thing that I was thinking of. James? Come on, buddy. You got to be quiet for me, please. Do you want to go out and play? Okay. Yeah, you can just sit right there. You did that really good last week, okay? Just listen to my voice, buddy. He must increase, but I must decrease. He must increase, but I must decrease. He who comes from above is above all. He who is of the earth is earthly and speaks of the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. So John's priorities were very, very straight. So before I go to Luke 7, I just want to ask you guys a question. We can just do a little bit of a popcorn deal here. What are the things in our lives that constantly are trying to increase themselves above the increasing that Jesus wants to do in our lives? Ryan, can you look at me now? Thank you. It's because if you listen to me, then he'll listen to me. Thank you. What are the things in our lives that want to raise themselves up above the increase that Jesus wants to be in our lives? You don't have to say a long sentence, you just have to say. Just about anything, right? Reputation, money, sports, lust, houses, cars, reputation, food, our pride, water, absolutely.
Shelter.
Yep.
Ground.
Yeah.
Cloud.
So there are a lot of things that want to raise themselves up above what Jesus wants to do in our lives. And here's the part that I always say to people that's a challenge when it comes to following Jesus. See, a lot of times when we follow Jesus, when we start following Jesus, it kind of feels easy. But as we start to follow Jesus more and more, to be really mature in following Jesus, it kind of feels like it gets easier and easier, but it kind of gets harder and harder at the same time. Okay? And what I mean by that is that over the many years that I have followed Jesus, this is the number one thing that I constantly feel Jesus tapping at in my life. He's constantly tapping at my life. He's constantly saying, Luke, are you happy about the work that I do in other people, regardless of who gets the credit? Are we happy?
Yes,
I'm happy you're happy. Are we happy when a church down the street doubles in size? Do we go, amen, they're preaching the gospel, lots of people are getting saved? Do we go, yeah, that's great? Are we happy when a men's ministry elsewhere has a pork roast and they have 500 men there?
yes. That's good.
That is good. But isn't there a part of us sometimes when we hear what's happening elsewhere and we go, oh man, it'd be nice if we could, you know.
I like that pork.
Yeah, pork is good. You got to follow along with what I'm doing here, Ryan, okay? Thank you. We have to, you know what the word consecration means? Consecration means you set apart something for really good things. We need to consecrate our hearts. We need to consecrate our motives. We need to consecrate our agenda. We need to consecrate what we want to do and set it aside and say, Jesus, what we want is what you want. We want you to do your work. We lift you high above everything else. Everybody has heard the phrase, it's amazing what can happen in a church, in an organization, anywhere, if no one cares who gets the credit.
I just read that.
I don't even know who quoted it. Do you remember who quoted it? No? Okay. Isn't that funny? That's kind of the way it should be, right? That phrase, nobody should know who wrote that phrase, because that very essence of that phrase means you don't care who gets the credit, right? Even if you don't get the credit for that phrase. But walking humbly and choosing to decrease in my life and letting Christ be increase in my life is a daily choice and a daily walking thing. Okay? I have to tell you about my finger. Everybody sees my finger that's bandaged? My wife wanted me to switch the smoke detectors in the house and swap them out. And so I'm very handy, not. And I started working on it, and it was fine, and I figured out a way to make it work. It wasn't perfect. But what my wife did is she said, can you start working on this? And I said, sure. And so I started working on it on Friday morning. And then she came along later, and she started to see some of the stuff that I was doing, and she wanted to be helpful, okay? And so she said, well, why are you doing it? You shouldn't do it that way. You should do it this way.
You're recording this, right?
Yeah, I'm recording this. She's safe. She's okay. She's okay. She's well, I actually didn't ask her permission, but I'm going to make her look good in this situation, so it's okay. The very first instinct in my heart was not to say, thank you, honey. You care about me. You want to help me to do a good job. And that's really where your motivation is coming from. I guarantee you the very first thing that came in my heart was, listen, woman, if you want to tell me, ask me to do something, then just trust me to do it. Okay?
She's seen your work previously, so she knows.
Wow. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, she probably has. Yeah, I have a track record of not being good at handy with things. So in the process of working on what I needed to work, I had to humble myself and call somebody, and they helped me out very nicely. Thank you, Tim. And then I was working on stripping some wires and doing some stuff and redoing stuff. My dad used to always say, you figure out how to do it about the time you're done, that's when you figure out how to do it. So that's what happened to me, and I was just kind of muddling through. But right in the middle of that, I remember, even before I called Tim, I just said, God, would you help me with this? Would you help me with this? And I asked God, when my wife was asking me these questions before she left, I asked God to help me to not respond in anger, not respond in a bad way, and just gently and nicely say, honey, you asked me to do this, so please trust me to do this. Okay, I'm going to get this done. But I wish I could say every time that I do that. No. But that's what learning to put Christ first in your life is all about. The other interesting thing is that when I was stripping wires, I slipped and I sliced my finger a little bit, and I had to put a Band-Aid on and whatever, and do all that fun stuff. Funny thing about when you cut yourself, in the church, we do this all the time. People have been deeply wounded by so many things, and when they come to the church, what we do is we say, all right, come to Jesus, and then, bam, you're healed, and let's go, let's serve Jesus. That is ludicrous. If I slice my little finger and it takes at least 2 weeks to heal completely, probably 2.5, there are people that have been stabbed right next to their heart by life. And when they come in, what do? We say, oh yeah, come on, let's go. Instead of, hey, how can we come around you? How can we pray for you? How can we walk through healing with you and be okay with the fact that it might take 6 months, a year and a half for you to get to a place where you have let the love of God and the exalting of God in your life heal you and get you to the place where, okay, now I can start following and serving Jesus. That's another deal. I'm getting off track now. Let's look at Luke chapter 7, and then we'll talk a little bit. In Luke chapter 7, it's funny. I didn't even realize that this fit, but this fits perfectly, the healing part. Because in Luke chapter 7, Jesus has some disciples come from of John, some of John's disciples. In verse 18, it says, then the disciples of John reported to him all these things. And they're talking about the different things that Jesus was doing. And John, of course, is in prison at the time. And he called 2 of his disciples to him, and he sent them to Jesus. Actually, I apologize. I don't think he's in prison at this point. But he still just wants to make sure he's still doing the right thing. So John called two of his disciples and sent them to Jesus, saying, Are you